Going to be bringing you a header install, high flow cats, and a Paragon titanium exhaust install in the C8 high top convertible. Stay tuned. One of the first steps is pulling the bumper off. You're going to want to get the bumper off so you can access the exhaust system, get at all the bolts, things like that. So that's the next step. Something real quick you're going to want to look out for. Once you get these screws out, you want to look for any shims that might have been in here. This helps line up the bumper to this deck lid here. So don't just rip your bumper off. Make sure that you don't have any of these in there. If you have some of these, make sure you just lay it down in front of the spot where it was. That way you know exactly where the shims went. This one's got some shims here. You can see a pretty good stack there to make this bumper line up. You don't want to lose those. Otherwise you might end up having a bumper that doesn't line up. And I've seen a lot of people pull these bumpers off and just let them go flying everywhere and then spend a lot of time trying to line them up. A lot of people don't even know where they go. So pay attention when you take them out. Put them right in front of the screws where they're supposed to be. That way when you go back in, you pop them back in, everything lines right back up. When you take this bumper off, there's 3 connectors in here you got to disconnect. Don't just pull the bumper and start pulling it back, because there's a coax cable there for the rear camera, and it actually, I've seen a lot of people with damaged wiring back here because that coax is the shortest wire, and people just pull it back and they damage it, and all of a sudden they have rear camera issues, intermittent issues with these. So make sure you disconnect the wiring as you pull it back so that you don't end up with an issue, especially with your rear backup camera. Here's the wiring I'm talking about. That's the coax. It's the shortest. So if you pull this thing back, you're going to have a camera issue. 3 connectors, not too bad. All right, if I was just doing an exhaust system, I actually wouldn't take the carpeting out. I can actually get at the bolts for the exhaust with a long extension, going right up in here, dropping the exhaust down and getting at it. And that's how I do it most of the time if I'm just doing an exhaust system. But since we're putting headers and high flow cats on it, we're going to take the trunk apart, get the closeout panel out, and access all the bolts back there. Next step's removing the air box. There's 2 10s over here. I already pulled out the air temp sensor that's right there. These clips, obviously push pin clips, Christmas trees people call them, they can break. You got to be careful taking them out. If they break, you can just replace them. You can get them, you know, online or at your GM dealership. But if you're careful with them, usually you can save them. There's a bunch of these on the other side as well. And I'll give you a better look once we open it, since it is a convertible. We'll have to shut the trunk and open the closeout panel. passenger side header out. This is a factory header. They are headers. Service information from GM actually does say that you have to drop the engine to get this out. You just witnessed you don't have to. You can sneak it out. Obviously, you got to sneak out the heat shields in a specific order to get this out. What you can see in the video if you watch should be documented pretty well, but I'm not going to bore you with taking out the driver's side. It is by far easier than the passenger side, and that's why I documented this one. Basically, same exact operation, except a few less things and a lot more room. So the driver's side, it says you don't have to drop the engine for. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove that side too, and then we'll start with the install. All right, obviously you have to go back and forth, opening the tech lid and then opening the closeout panel for the convertible. In between getting things out, pulling the converters out, you know, like the converter's loose, that does not go out the other way, comes out through the trunk. So you got to just go back and forth, use the key fob or use the button on the door to open and close it, and you know, work back and forth a little bit, go up and down with the lift a few times. If you're doing it in your driveway, which it might be tough, this job, I guess if you got it high enough on jack stands, but it'd be tough. This is a lot easier if you have a lift. So I'm gonna get this catalytic converter out here, and then we're going to start the install. All right, we're installing American Racing headers. They're good headers. I've installed them before. They go on real nice. Corsa. These are actually really good. The Corsa, I think they're 400s. They're better than the 200s. The 200s flow so much, I usually set codes. So really well-made product, the Corsa catalytic converters are. So we're gonna start the install on these.